Push-ups are a fantastic full body exercise that can be performed in many different ways, ranging from beginner to advanced levels of fitness. There's always a way to make your push-ups harder. If you're finding that you're doing 30 or 40 or 50 or more push-ups in one single set, maybe it's time to start making that exercise a little bit harder. Push-ups are great because they don't necessarily require any equipment, and some of the variations we're doing today will only need a chair as a piece of equipment for them. So push-ups also just don't only work at the chest. This is a common misconception. Push-ups can work a multitude of different muscle groups. So that might be your triceps at the back of the arms, deltoids or the shoulders, serratus anterior, which is the wings underneath your armpits, the transverse abdominis around the core musculature, and if you're doing your push-ups correctly, your glutes and your quads should also be working during this exercise. So let's get started with the basic push-up position. So we're going to be starting in a plank position with your pelvis tucked in and your head neutral. Your palms are going to be directly underneath of your shoulders. So once we're in this position, we can also establish our foot stance. So if we went with a wider foot stance, we're considered to be more stable, which is easier. If we bring our feet together, we are less stable, so that means it's a little bit harder. So with my pelvis tucked under, my head is neutral. I'm going to bend at the elbow. I'm going to bring my chin down to the floor and then back up. I want to keep my elbows slightly tucked in as opposed to letting them wing out to the side at a 90-degree angle. We want the push-up to be less of a T and more of an arrow position. Make sure that you're pulling up through the core, bringing your rib cage down to the ground. Inhale on the way down and exhale and blow the floor away from you. Next, we're going to do the modified push-up. The modified push-up is an inclined push-up that is a little bit more ideal than doing push-ups from your knees. Doing push-ups from your knees takes away a lot of the core stabilization that is required to do a full push-up. So I would rather our members do gradually inclined push-ups. So you can start from anywhere from inclining on the wall to a counter or a table to a chair, and eventually just working your way down into the bottom position. Today I've got a chair with me, so it's going to be very similar to the setup of the basic push-up. My arms are going to be underneath my shoulders or maybe slightly wider. I'm going to come out into my plank position. My spine is neutral, my head is straight. I'm going to bend at the elbows and bring my chest down and then back up. Again, keeping my elbows tucked in slightly and breathing as appropriate. So I'm going to inhale on the way down and exhale on the way up. Next is the eccentric push-up. The eccentric movement is the hardest portion of the movement or of the exercise, where our muscles are working the hardest and breaking down the most. So really, essentially what we're doing here is we're just milking out the amount of time that it takes for you to do the push-up. So say you don't want to necessarily elevate your feet quite yet, we can always go into our basic push-up position, hands underneath our shoulders, but instead of just coming up and down, we can do it for counts, like a tempo. So it would be down, 2, 3, hold, 2, 1, 2, 3. So by increasing the amount of time that we're under tension is going to help increase the difficulty of the exercise. Feet elevated push-ups produce more force than your standard push-up. So that means if that standard push-up is getting a little bit easy for you, it's time to move to a negative push-up. So to get into position for this one, we're going to elevate the feet onto a chair or a bench or a box. And pretty much everything after that is going to be similar to the basic push-up. So once I've got my feet elevated on a secure location, again, feet can be a little bit wider for a little bit more stabilization or narrower. My hands are going to be underneath my shoulders or slightly wider, and I'm going to bring my chest down to the ground, bending at the elbow, and then pushing back up. By bringing ourselves into a negative push-up, we are increasing the amount of force gravity has on our upper body and taking away different elements of stabilization. Next is the bird dog push-up. The bird dog push-up is a great variation that's really going to challenge your core stabilization. So we're going to get into the standard push-up position with our arms underneath our shoulders or slightly a little bit wider. Coming down into your nice strong plank position, make sure the glutes are tucked under, nice neutral spine, and neck is also neutral. You're gonna bring your chest down to the ground just as you would with a normal push-up, except this time, you're gonna raise one arm. Lower it back down, come back into the push-up, and then raise one leg. Try to make this a continuous movement. If you're even more advanced, you can do opposite arm, opposite leg for even more of a challenge. So it looks something like this. Pushing up and lifting up. Oops. So with the bird dog push-up, it's really important that you're staying completely solid through the core so that you don't rock over to one side or lose your balance. And also important to note with this one that it's not necessarily about the height of the leg or the height of the arm, but more about maintaining that balance and doing a really good quality repetition rather than the quantity of repetitions. So in conclusion, today we went over some different push-up variations. We did the basic push-up, we did the incline push-up, the negative push-up, the eccentric push-up, and the bird dog push-up. It's important to do push-ups as they are a full body movement. They challenge our upper body strength and our core stability. Additionally, sometimes we can get caught up in trying to do more and more repetitions of a certain movement. If you're finding yourself doing 40 or more push-ups in a single round or a single set, maybe it's time to add a variation to make it a little bit more difficult than just doing the same standard push-up constantly.
Hey guys, Ryan Balance here. Today we're going to be going over shoulder press variations. So as we know with the shoulder press, there's many different ways that we can kind of do the shoulder press. It's going to be really focusing on strengthening our shoulder joint, as well as our elbow joint, as well as our biceps, as well as our triceps, as well as some of our back muscles to help stabilize during the motion. So there's many muscle groups that are used during the shoulder press. And today we're going to be going over some variations that will help us do them during the pandemic, as well as help improve our shoulder stability and strength in the future once we get back into the gym. So hopefully you all enjoy.
The basic seated shoulder press. So starting things off, we want to make sure that we're getting our dumbbells up safely, our back is fully up against our back pad, and when we are pressing, we are making sure that we are not locking our elbows out hard at the top to keep our elbows safe. Our first variation is our standing shoulder press. So here we have to make sure that we have sufficient shoulder range of motion to be able to press straight upwards. As well, when we are pressing, we want to make sure that our core is engaged and our glutes are in the proper spot so that that load is not hurting our lower back. So really try to focus on the core. Coming into our seated one-arm shoulder press. Having the load on one side really forces your core and your obliques to fight fairly hard to make sure that your body doesn't move. So this will increase some core stability throughout as well as shoulder strength. So really trying to focus on keeping your body from moving. The Arnold press. So with this shoulder press variation, it focuses on gaining size and strength of the shoulder joint, so the hypertrophy. As we are keeping time under tension throughout this whole exercise, we are really forcing those muscles to work very hard to stabilize and press that weight, therefore in turn gaining some muscle. Last but not least, our bell up kettlebell shoulder press. So with this variation, it focuses on shoulder, elbow, and wrist stability. As the load is above the wrist, you really have to squeeze that kettlebell very tightly to make sure that it is staying in the proper position and that the range of motion and the path is proper. So just making sure to squeeze tight to keep that load above, and your shoulder will be happy. In conclusion, we did the standing shoulder press, the seated one arm, the Arnold press, as well as the bell up kettlebell press. Hopefully those variations will help you out in the future. Take care, everybody.
Hello, FSI Hannah here from PSP Toronto. Today we are going to be going over plank variations. The plank primarily challenges our core muscles However, if we're doing it properly, we're also be activating through our lower body, specifically through our glutes, through our quads, and our upper body, specifically through our shoulders. Planks are a really great exercise as it helps us with everyday activities, such as sitting upright with proper posture or walking. Specifically, if we're walking with a load on our back, having good core stability and strength is going to really help us. So if we were rucking, having a good stable core is going to really help us with this activity. We're going to be going over 4 plank variations today. Watch ahead to find some variations that work for you. The basic plank. To set up for this, we're going to do a high plank. We're going to plant our palms on the ground, shoulder width apart, fingers spread, weight even throughout our hands. We're going to be on our toes with our feet together or hip width apart between those two widths. When we're in this position, we're going to press our toes into the ground, press our palms into the ground, keeping our upper body nice and active, squeezing through our glutes to help stabilize our midline, and then pulling that core nice and tight by pulling the belly button back to the spine. We want a nice straight line while we're doing this plank. We don't want to be dipping down through our hips or shooting our hips up towards the sky. Now we have our modified plank. For this variation, we're going to use an elevated surface, such as a box, or you can use a chair, a bench, a barbell on a low setting, whatever you choose. And our goal here is to slowly work down in the elevation that we're using until we can do a full plank from the ground. Adding this elevation is going to make it a little bit easier on our core muscles so that we can work towards that full plank. Shoulder taps. For this one, we are taking our hands, placing them on opposite shoulders while we are in that plank position. It's going to challenge our core stability by lifting off the one point of contact and bringing it around. What we can do with our feet is place them wider than our normal plank stance to give us a little bit more stability. As this exercise gets easier, you can slowly move your feet in as long as you're able to keep your hips pointed straight down towards the ground. What we don't want is that hip shift up and down as we're doing these shoulder taps. If that's happening, you don't have the core control for this just yet. Plank walkouts. For this variation, we can walk out with either our feet or our hands. Once we get really good, we can try to do both. The easiest version of this is to first start walking out with your feet, and then once you get better at that, start walking out with our hands. The goal for this is to keep our core as stable as possible while we're performing these walkout movements. What we don't want is too much shifting around back and forth as we're bringing ourselves back in or bringing ourselves out. Stability ball rollouts. Now we're adding a stability ball into this plank. So we're adding the instability of having our hands planted on this ball, as well as adding the rolling motion, which is going to really challenge our core stability and also work our shoulder stability a little bit here as well. The more inflated your ball is, the easier that it will be. Our goal is to keep the rolls as smooth and consistent as possible, challenging yourself by going a little bit further out if you can. In conclusion, we went over the basic plank, the elevated plank, plank shoulder taps, plank walkouts, and stability ball plank rollouts. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to tune in next week for our next variation video.
Hi everyone, Kim Lazo here, fitness and sports instructor from Garrison, Toronto. Today I'm going to run you through week 6 of our exercise variation series, and today we're going to focus on the Pallof Press. This exercise focuses on our core, especially our obliques at the side here. This is going to help us with everyday activities like running, as well as a lot of military tasks and any exercise that requires you to have one load heavier on one side. This is going to allow us to have control over our body and make sure that we're leveled through our hips, shoulders, and our trunk is nice and stable. Hopefully you take one of these variations and add them to a future training session. Start by anchoring your resistance band about chest height and take a few steps to the side until you feel tension. If you don't feel anything in your core, this can mean you're too close to the anchor point. And you may be too far away if you can't keep the resistance band at the midline of your body. Clasp your hands tightly together and aim to keep the band at the midline of your body. You're going to exhale as you push out and inhale as you bring it in. The wider your feet are, the more stability you'll have. The band will keep trying to pull you inwards, but fight that rotation and keep the band at the center. For this variation, you can use a lighter band. You're going to lift the foot closest to the anchor point. Still keeping a leveled and upright torso, the goal here is also to prevent the knee from caving inward. This is going to challenge your balance and proprioception, as well as all your stabilizer muscles. In this variation, you'll be going in a circular motion, keeping the hips squared in front of you. Still actively pushing against the resistance to keep control over the band. You can try this going clockwise and counterclockwise, as well as make sure to do it on both sides of your body. Don't forget to keep that breathing consistent throughout the movement. With the leg closer to the anchor point, you're going to step out into a lunge position. As you isometrically hold this position, you'll be avoiding knee valgus or your knee from caving inwards towards the band. It's very important for military members to challenge their trunk stability and core strength in different positions like this. The most challenging variation today is also going to test our shoulder stability. For more leverage, and as shown here, the foot closer to the anchor point will be forward. The key here is to engage our core and not arch through the lower back as we press up. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Just to recap, today we went through the Pallof Press as well as 4 variations. We did it on a single leg as well as stirring the pot. We did a lunge hold as well as a half kneeling overhead press. Remember, the Pallof Press not only strengthens your core, but it's very functional to everyday activities as well as military tasks. A strong and stable core is fundamental to fitness. Make sure you start at the trunk and incorporate these Pallof presses.